Hey guys, while making a video on locations in The Walking Dead, I began to be reminded of the presence of FEMA during the beginning of the outbreak. FEMA stands for the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Their job in our world is to provide aid to disasters too big for states or local governments to handle. Governors of states will usually ask for federal help, and in return, the president will declare an official disaster so FEMA can assist. We've seen them during disasters like 9/11, Hurricane Katrina, and the California wildfires. In the world of The Walking Dead, we know the biggest disaster was the wildfire virus. It brought about societal collapse and forced survivors to rely on old world technology and medieval styles of living. Like I said earlier, I was reminded of their presence while researching for other videos. Specifically, what caught my eye was how many camps our survivors come across. Through the environment of these locations, we really get to see the organization's attempt to help survivors in need. Unfortunately, like all government agencies in this world, collapse was inevitable, and their ruins are all that's left of their presence. So, what happened to all of them? Why, with all the resources and help from the military, did none of these places last? We might not get these answers specifically, but I want to look at what info we do have about the start of the outbreak and try to piece these things together. So without further ado, let's get started. The first time we technically see FEMA in the Walking Dead universe is in the webisode Everything Dies. This webisode takes place at the start of the initial outbreak as we follow a woman navigating the start of the apocalypse. When she and her kids seek shelter in a house, we see a FEMA helicopter flying overhead, alerting any remaining survivors in the residential area to head towards the park for evacuation to the city of Atlanta.
People within the sound of my voice should make their way to the green concession stand at the northeast corner of the park. We can move you to a government facility in Atlanta.
They attempt to go, but get ambushed by walkers. Later, when Rick enters the city, we see how well the evacuation to Atlanta really went. Abandoned military vehicles and soldiers' bodies litter the streets, and we don't see any signs of FEMA camps here, but we will later. Also, right after Sophia goes missing, we see Shane telling Lori that he's preparing to quietly leave the group. As he starts up one of the vehicles left on the highway, we hear this emergency broadcast issued by the Office of Civil Defense.
The alert system has been activated. Remain calm. Help is on the way. Office of Civil Defense. Asshole.
It says everything we already know, but this is the emergency message civilians would have heard at the start. This isn't a broadcast from FEMA directly, but we know they worked closely with the Office of Civil Defense, so I wanted to mention it. And in the Telltale video games, we hear similar messages, but these include a ranking system of numbers 1 through 10 of cities and their danger levels that we don't hear in the show. I couldn't hear these ranking systems clearly enough in the game, so I'll play the messages that we do hear.
Meanwhile, inland, Atlanta has been downgraded temporarily to an 8, with attacks and rioting being reported in all precincts. Citizens are currently advised to stay in their homes or move towards the cities of Charlotte, Atlanta, and Orlando. If citizens choose to stay in their homes, they are urged to be near their radios and await further instructions. Moving to the cities of Charlotte, Atlanta, or Orlando may become necessary in order to ensure the safety of all citizens.
The first FEMA camp shown in The Walking Dead comes as early as Season 2. After Carl is shot, we see Shane and Otis go to the high school to scavenge medicine and surgical equipment.
Okay, let's take a look.
We see multiple triage tents and military vehicles alongside local law enforcement. Clearly, this was set up in the early days of the apocalypse, and the high school acted as an ideal location for FEMA to help aid the community. In a deleted scene, we learned that this was the high school Maggie and Randall attended. Herschel and Otis probably heard that this FEMA camp was established here, but ultimately decided to stay on the farm. That was a smart decision for them because we can see that this didn't last too long, and I assumed it happened fast. By the time Shane and Otis arrive, the walkers haven't wandered off yet, and no one has attempted to scavenge here, but with a herd like this, only a madman would. Whatever happened here is difficult to determine, but we do see a lot of vehicles, meaning no one left in a hurry, so whatever happened must have happened quickly. The majority of walkers are outside, so not a lot of people had time to seek shelter inside. We see a few walkers in FEMA gear, so we know for sure FEMA was assisting here all the way up until this place fell. By all accounts, they were successful until one day when everything changed. I love this location because it's what really got me interested in FEMA. It's the only organization we see see multiple times that really tried to help early on, and their remnants always tell a story. The next bit of information we get comes in the episode Nebraska. When Rick, Herschel, and Glenn are sitting in the bar, we meet two survivors named Dave and Tony. After a drink, Rick asks why they're traveling south, and he says,
Now, first it was D.C. Heard there might be some kind of refugee camp, but the roads are so jammed we never even got close.
Then Tony says a guy told him the Coast Guard was running ferries along the Georgia coastline, carrying citizens to supposed safe zones in the Caribbean islands. Then, interestingly, Dave says
The latest was a rail yard in Montgomery running trains to the middle of the country, Kansas, Nebraska.
Nebraska. Low population, lots of guns.
this is such a key moment because it's one of the only times we ever hear about the outside world. I bring this scene up because the wiki tells us that FEMA was in charge of these evacuations, even though it's not said directly in the show. I believe FEMA is, though, because this is exactly what they'd be tasked with doing. It might be a stretch, but Dave mentioning Nebraska might have meant something. In The World Beyond, we're introduced to the city of Omaha, Nebraska. It's a massive fortified community with around 100,000 survivors. It's a part of the Alliance of the Three, alongside the Civic Republic in Philadelphia and the city of Portland in Oregon. Spoilers for The World Beyond, skip here if you don't want to hear anything. Unfortunately, we see the Civic Republic completely wipe out the city of Omaha in an attempt to consolidate all the power. I know I got a little off topic there, but the point is, FEMA transporting people to Nebraska could have been what helped establish a colony of survivors this big, and regardless of what happened here, I think that that's pretty interesting. The next time we see signs of FEMA is when the group returns to Atlanta to rescue Beth. I gotta say, there's a lot of cool shots of the city, and I love seeing our group return here. While attempting to capture some of the Grady Memorial officers, they chased him down an alley that leads us right into our next camp. Unlike the high school camp, this camp is completely decimated. We can immediately piece together that this was a FEMA shelter based on the triage tents and trailers marked with their name. Based on what we saw in the webisode, we know civilians were encouraged to evacuate into Atlanta where the military and police could protect them. It seems that during that time, FEMA set up a camp here and civilians later gathered in this alleyway seeking help. That help unfortunately didn't last long because 3 days after the outbreak, the military flew into the area under the cover of darkness and napalmed the city during Operation Cobalt. Leaving it as a burned out and destroyed alleyway with abandoned buildings, damaged vehicles, and disrupted bodies. The most eerie detail of this place is the melted walkers stuck to the pavement. It's pretty jarring to look at, knowing that these were once people seeking refuge before the people they were supposed to trust killed them all. We even see a body hanging out of the burnt trailer and what looks to be a failed attempt at escaping. With the last location, we can assume FEMA tried their best to help people, but ultimately the camp was overrun when walkers entered the camp, or someone turned, causing a chain reaction that left no survivors. This camp is the opposite in the fact that FEMA was probably doing everything they could, but it wasn't the walkers that decimated them. Sadly, it was the military. These workers who set up tents and trailers and even took the time to write a sign on the water tower were wiped out in seconds. This one has always stuck with me for these reasons, and it's morbid, but it's one of my favorite locations in the show. Another FEMA location, well, previous location, we all know is the hilltop. This site was previously the historic Barrington House where children were taken on field trips, and the house frequently hosted community events. When the outbreak began, the government used these grounds as a FEMA safe zone, and eventually the rooms of this house were converted into living quarters for survivors. They brought security, supplies, and temporary living quarters before eventually abandoning the site. Left to fend for themselves, survivors gathered lumber from nearby materials yards and dismantled a barn to build their walls, turning this historic site into a fortified settlement. We don't know why FEMA left this location specifically, but reasons like the collapse of the government and Operation Cobalt are cited as potential reasons. This would make the hilltop the only location in the show where FEMA abandoned civilians, and I find that so interesting. The next time we see anything relating to FEMA is in Fear the Walking Dead. June decides to leave the stadium and scavenge for supplies. She returns here because it once belonged to a community she was previously a part of. Before the apocalypse, this building served as a recreational center for the local community. As the outbreak began to worsen nationwide, FEMA converted this building into a refugee camp for survivors to take shelter in. They were also tasked to distribute large amounts of supplies, as seen by the stacks of MRE boxes in the cafeteria area. At some point, June and her daughter Rose stumbled upon this FEMA camp seeking shelter and refuge. June's daughter ended up catching pneumonia, so she left to scavenge supplies, and when she returned, she found everyone had died and reanimated. June's daughter Rose had succumbed to her sickness and died in the night. When she reanimated, she must have bit others, causing the community to fall apart in the 3 days that June was gone. From what we know about this location, it was established at the start of the apocalypse and lasted a pretty long time. We can infer this because June says she was a part of other groups before she joined this one. She says there were other people here who knew how to fight and survive, so they taught others how to as well. From everything we know, this FEMA location was the most effective we've seen in this world. They successfully provided food, shelter, and medicine. They never encountered malicious groups and never had an outside walker problem. Unfortunately though, just like the rest, it inevitably fell. Mistakes were made here, and I love that we get a full detailed story from start to end, unlike the others. That being said, that's every mention of FEMA that I could find. Hopefully I didn't miss anything. We see in this world that FEMA was tasked to provide aid to citizens in need. In the wake of global outbreak and facing the end of modern civilization, FEMA stepped up and tried. From what we see, they were completely overwhelmed, as no one from the organization has ever been found alive. From the clues left behind, we know FEMA worked with the CDC, the US military, and local law enforcement to orchestrate mass evacuations, but when our survivors find these locations, all that remains of these efforts are abandoned refugee camps, looped radio messages, leftover supplies, and of course, the dead. With the collapse of the federal government on September 10, 2010, which we learned was only 3 to 4 weeks into the wildfire virus outbreak, we know the infected began to quickly outnumber the normal humans. Soon enough, the evacuations failed, so FEMA began the emergency broadcast system to tell people to head towards the cities since the US military was there. But like I said, with the rising number of infected, things quickly became disorganized. Without government assistance, these shelters soon ran out of resources, and the military either took charge or fled. With the high school camp, we see everyone was turned, and we don't have a concrete story on what happened. With the Atlanta camp, we see their efforts at making a safe place for civilians, but devastatingly, their own military wiped them out. And lastly, with the FEMA shelter in Texas, we see them create a successful community and last longer than anyone, just for everything they've accomplished to be undone in one night. The tragedy of FEMA has always stuck with me as being particularly depressing. In a world full of death, it's so sad to see the ones actively fighting to preserve it be some of the first ones to go. It's devastating when death comes from inside the camp. We've seen it time and time again. Things seem to be going well for a community, then overnight, everything changes. What I find even more devastating is when the military, the ones who are supposed to protect civilians, are the ones that wipe them out. It's the sad reality of the world. It's the struggle of doing what's right and what's going to keep you alive. The government believed Operation Cobalt was the right decision to make, viewing it as a necessary extreme to contain the wildfire virus. But we see FEMA operated with a different directive. They were tasked with managing the civilian crisis by evacuating civilians and setting up FEMA shelters to feed and house civilians. They continued to do this all the way up until the military ultimately abandoned them. In this new world, no one's setting up camps with free medicine and shelter anymore. Those days are long gone. Every time our characters came across these camps, it was a reminder for them and the audience that they are truly alone. All you can have faith in is yourself and the people you surround yourself with. At least that's what I took away whenever I saw them, and that's what compelled me to talk about them. I know it's been a minute since the last video, but I've been writing a lot of scripts and just doing everyday life stuff. I want to go ahead and say thank you for all the support recently. It's truly insane that people show up and watch and let alone subscribe. I never thought I'd come this far in just a year, but here I am with 1,000+ subscribers, and soon I'll be getting my first check from a platform I've been on for over a decade. Saying thank you just never feels like enough, but I mean it wholeheartedly. I love The Walking Dead, but I want to say I'm not a Walking Dead YouTuber. If you came for that, I'm sorry to disappoint you. I'm making videos I want to see, but they're not always going to be on The Walking Dead. I've been wanting to say that for a while now, so I hope you guys understand. Anyways though, I do appreciate you for watching this far, and hopefully you enjoyed it. Thank you guys again, and I hope to see you in the next one. Peace.